The drama surrounding Toronto's streetcars isn't simply about slow vehicles crawling through downtown streets. It's about a century-long story of political decisions, urban planning failures, and a stubborn loyalty to cars that has quietly sabotaged what could have been one of North America's greatest public transit systems. On the surface, Toronto proudly advertises that it has the largest historic streetcar network on the continent. But behind that impressive statistic lies a far more complicated reality, a transit system that survives not because it was carefully nurtured and improved, but because the city moved so slowly in dismantling it that the network simply never disappeared entirely. To understand how Toronto ended up with a streetcar system that feels frustratingly inefficient today, you have to go back nearly a century. In the early 20th century, streetcars weren't unique to Toronto at all. Almost every major city across the United States and Canada had them. They were the backbone of urban mobility, carrying workers, shoppers, and students across growing cities long before the automobile dominated the streets. But by the mid-1900s, that era began to vanish. Cities across North America dismantled their streetcar systems piece by piece, ripping out tracks and replacing them with highways, parking lots, and wider roads designed to accommodate the rising power of the automobile. Toronto followed this trend, but with a twist. While many cities removed their streetcars entirely, Toronto only partially dismantled its network. Entire routes were eliminated to make room for cars, often against strong public opposition. Officials argued that streetcars were slowing down traffic and obstructing progress, while road planners pushed aggressively to make the city more accessible for drivers. Some lines disappeared entirely, while others were replaced by subways that were supposed to eventually eliminate most surface streetcar operations in the downtown core. For a time, that vision seemed inevitable. When Toronto opened its first subway line in 1954, officials openly talked about replacing the majority of streetcars with underground trains. The plan was straightforward: build more subways, remove the old streetcar lines, and free up downtown streets for cars. But something unexpected happened. Residents began pushing back, public pressure grew, and eventually pro-streetcar politicians were elected. By the 1970s, the dismantling of the network had slowed dramatically, and some routes even began returning in the following decades. Today, those streetcars still carry hundreds of thousands of riders every weekday. That number alone is remarkable. Despite decades of neglect, outdated infrastructure, and operational inefficiencies, the system remains heavily used. In many ways, its survival feels almost accidental. Instead of being treated as a vital part of the city's transportation future, the streetcars often seem to exist simply because they've always been there. For anyone who has experienced modern tram systems in European cities, this contrast can feel especially frustrating. In cities like Amsterdam, trams glide through dedicated corridors, seamlessly integrated into the urban environment. They run frequently, predictably, and quickly, forming a crucial part of the public transit network. But in Toronto, riding the streetcar often feels like stepping into a slower, more chaotic version of urban transportation. One of the most obvious problems is traffic. Toronto's streetcars frequently operate in mixed traffic, meaning they share lanes with cars. That alone introduces endless delays. A single driver making a left turn can hold up dozens of passengers. Streetcars can crawl along so slowly that walking sometimes becomes the faster option. It's a strange situation when a vehicle, designed to move large numbers of people efficiently, ends up trapped behind individual drivers. The problem becomes even worse because the system struggles to maintain reliable schedules. Delays compound throughout the day, causing vehicles to bunch together. Riders might wait 20 minutes for a streetcar, only to see 3 arrive at once. When that happens, the first vehicle fills up quickly while the others run nearly empty behind it. Transit operators often try to correct these gaps by turning vehicles around early, forcing passengers to disembark before reaching their destination. For commuters who depend on the system, these disruptions can feel like a daily gamble. Even when traffic isn't the issue, Toronto's streetcars still lose precious time at intersections. Many stops are placed directly before traffic lights, forcing vehicles to stop twice within seconds, once for passengers and again for the signal. Drivers often race ahead of streetcars when lights change, further slowing them down. And in some intersections, cars turning left are actually given priority over streetcars filled with dozens of passengers. It's a striking illustration of how deeply the city prioritizes drivers over public transit. Winter, often cited as a reason for Toronto's transit struggles, is frequently used as an excuse rather than a genuine obstacle. Critics claim that harsh Canadian winters make tram systems impractical, but that argument quickly falls apart when you look at cities across Scandinavia, where trams operate reliably despite far harsher conditions. In reality, rail-based transit can perform remarkably well in snowy weather. The real issue isn't winter itself, it's the infrastructure and operational decisions surrounding the system. Even the areas where Toronto attempted improvements revealed deeper problems. A few streetcar routes were given dedicated lanes intended to separate them from traffic. In theory, this should have dramatically improved speed and reliability. But even there, the system falls short. Stops remain extremely close together, forcing constant halts. Traffic signals still prioritize cars, and at intersections, streetcars often move painfully slowly due to outdated track designs that increase derailment risk. Passenger experience also suffers in other ways. In many cities, tram stops provide real-time information displays, allowing riders to see exactly when the next vehicle will arrive. Inside the vehicles themselves, clear announcements and screens help passengers navigate the system easily. In Toronto, that level of information is often missing or limited. Riders frequently wait with little idea when their streetcar will actually appear. Accessibility presents another challenge. Modern low-floor streetcars were introduced across the network in recent years, theoretically making boarding easier for everyone, including people using wheelchairs. But many stops remain poorly designed, forcing operators to deploy ramps manually because platforms are not aligned with the vehicle floors. Instead of seamless access, boarding becomes a slow, awkward process that benefits no one. Yet perhaps the most revealing story about Toronto's streetcars comes from a single experiment on King Street. For years, this corridor was infamous for delays. Streetcars carrying tens of thousands of passengers each day crawled through traffic behind far fewer cars. The imbalance was staggering. Cars occupied most of the street space while moving only a fraction of the people. In 2017, the city launched a pilot project that restricted through traffic for cars along sections of King Street. Vehicles could still access local destinations, but they could no longer drive straight through the corridor. The results were immediate. Streetcar speeds increased, reliability improved, ridership grew significantly. Even cycling increased dramatically despite the absence of dedicated bike lanes. Most importantly, the street itself became more vibrant. With fewer cars dominating the space, sidewalks expanded, patios appeared, and pedestrian activity surged. Businesses benefited from increased foot traffic. Emergency vehicles moved more easily without being trapped in congestion. The experiment demonstrated something urban planners have known for decades. When cities prioritize people over cars, streets become more efficient and more enjoyable at the same time. And yet, despite its success, the project was never expanded across the rest of the streetcar network. Political pressure, especially from suburban representatives who prioritize driving convenience, prevented broader changes. Instead of replicating a proven solution, the city largely left the rest of the system unchanged. This hesitation reflects a deeper cultural issue. Toronto remains deeply attached to the idea that driving should always be convenient, even in the most densely populated parts of the city. Every proposed improvement to transit, cycling, or pedestrian infrastructure quickly becomes entangled in debates about traffic. The assumption that roads must prioritize cars above all else continues to shape decisions across the city. Ironically, that mindset harms drivers as well. Decades of research have shown that building more car-friendly infrastructure rarely solves congestion. Instead, the most effective way to reduce traffic is by providing fast, reliable alternatives to driving. When public transit works well, people naturally choose it. But when transit is slow, unreliable, and inconvenient, many commuters simply drive instead.